Since Shacknews was founded in 1996, we're reflecting on the industry as a whole and what it was, and how it's changed since then. What are some development practices you used in 1996?
In 1996, I mean, 1996 was the year that you tried to get people to stop playing Quake if you were not at id Software, really, because Quake was just an explosion. Um, but I think like things that development practices then, when things were in testing, you put them on, you burn them to a CD, and you sent them out to a ton of people because the quality of the internet just wasn't there to send, especially for people on home computers. Um, that the idea of downloadable content of games having this much longer life cycle didn't exist. Sometimes things still happened on paper, believe it or not. I mean, it was one of the most exciting times in games because when people made leaps, they made massive leaps. Like I often use 1993, which I know is predates Shack News, but to me that was the beginning of the graphics arms race, really, and we see it absolutely still going strong in 1996. So 1993 was the year that Myst came out and Doom came out, and if you were not one of those two games, you knew you were behind, and you just stared at your monitor and thought, my God, how are we going to catch those people? And in id Software, as you can see, they were simply not catchable. Quake comes out and it's just still going like a rocket. So I mean, pretty much everything has changed. Everything has changed about this, everything. I'm not sure what hasn't changed.
Are there, the follow up to that, are there any development practices from the past 25 years that you miss today that you don't use anymore?
Yeah, yeah, I no, not really. I mean, because I think if we look, if just certainly the internet existed back then, right? But it's a far cry from the internet that we have today. Like I don't remember what year this. There was one specific game that Surtac published, and at the publisher, sorry, at the distributor duplicator, disc 3 was never copied, right? So it was labeled, but there was no data on the disc. So that goes in a box, goes out to all these stores. So yeah, this definitely would have been pre 1996. But anyway, it goes out to all the stores, and there's nothing on disc 3. That's not just like, oh, let's put out a Steam update, right? That is chaos. Like, that's just, and it was horrible. So I think that the internet has done, like, just the fact that it's so widely accessible. Digital distribution has changed everything. Obviously, you know, consoles have changed everything. Gaming has become massively ubiquitous thanks to social games and mobile phones. People who never would have considered themselves gamers before absolutely consider themselves gamers. The last 10 years has been just inconceivably cool. As somebody who was here in 1996 and 1986, and playing D&D in 1976, I was, this is to me like the greatest time in games because there is so much happening.
Since 1996, we've gone from PlayStation 1 to 5 and Xbox One to Xbox Series X and their terrible naming structure. And Nintendo continuing to dominate the handheld market, and PC hardware continuing to drive technology with RTX and other crazy cards. What are some trends over the past 25 years that you remember as being big step forward to industry in terms of development, marketing, distribution, and customer engagement, stuff like that?
This is such a, well, the internet, right? So let's remembering that I started in 1981 on an Apple II. I feel like I'm cheating with this question, honestly, because I get to say two massive things. I get to say the internet and the mouse, right? So, I mean, I predate mice. Oh my God, this is the how old is Brenda interview. I'm 29, damn it, and I'm not going off of that. Yeah, so there's just been incredible changes in that, especially, I mean, I think really mobile phones, mobile gaming and casual gaming brought a load of people into games that hadn't done it before. But the biggest changes, internet, mouse.
Those are good answers.
Mouse look, mouse look was, which was introduced in Quake. I'm not trying to make this about Quake, by the way. It just happened that Quake did that.
It's just a big game at that time. That's not what it was, it can't be helped.
Yeah, it was a really big game at that time, for sure.
I'd also just throw in that the expansion in storage technology has transformed games. I mean, I bought an Amiga 1200. This would be bit before 1996, but not too much before, which had 20 megabit byte hard disk.
Ooh.
People, you heard that right? 20 megabits, and that was massive hard disk. That was an amazing thing. And now you look at the kind of storage you have, terabytes of storage. So you all of a sudden you get these far bigger games, so that it kind of frees up developers to go big or go home. That storage space you have now just gives you that freedom you just did not have.
It's still the age-old argument. Designers always want more. Like every time it's like, we've got this amazing idea, a programmer will have this, but we have amazing performance concerns. Back in the dinosaur days, it was there's not enough room on the disk, there's not enough room on the CD, and now that's not the issue anymore. But sometimes there's not enough room in memory.
I was going to say, I was thinking throughout this question, I go, back in 1996, we were still using floppy disks. And I remember what a step forward it was to just move from floppy disk to a CD-ROM, and then from there to the Blu-rays that we have today.
We have loads of stuff like back from then, just because John and I are both collectors. Honestly, too much stuff. I say this, and then we still keep getting more.
So, like, speaking of that, like, what industry changes have surprised you the most over the last 25 years? Like, and that can be positive or negatively. Like, if things have changed, and you're like, why would they do that? Or this is great.
I would say from the time when I graduate college. My degree is basically computer science and writing, and when I graduated school, there were 37 the figure of that time is 37% women graduating in computer science. And when I started in the game industry, there were 5 women in the company and 5 men. And then somehow we did this, and fewer and fewer and fewer women. So then it got to a fairly desperate state, and now we're seeing that come back up, fortunately. So the decline in women, like the decline in the number of women in the industry, obviously that wasn't great. And we do a lot of stuff to get more women, whether it's speaking or workshops or whatever, to get more women into the industry and interested in computer science and in game development. Now I've forgotten the beginning part of the question because I just decided I was going to give a talk on that. I didn't mean to do that. Well, give me the question again.
Oh no, it's what industry changes have surprised you the most over the 25 years? Is this the lack of women in gaming, basically?
Well, that it decreased. I mean, there were a lot of women in computer science. I mean, in fact, the very first computer, the ENIAC, had an all-female programming team. I mean, the rise of digital distribution, the crash of physical distribution, and that isn't surprising to anybody who I'm sure who gets into games after Shacknews starts. But going back to what Chris said, like in the very early days, we were literally like you put your monitor on your hard disk because your 10 meg hard disk was like this, right? Another one thing too, like especially when we go to digital distribution, oh my goodness, I totally know something. As we go to digital distribution, people go, all right, we're not going to do these big box games because it takes a lot of shelf space and takes a lot of stuff. So big box games become collectible. Okay, I can totally see that happening. I never would have seen 6-figure prices for sealed console games. That is mind-blowing to me. I certainly wouldn't have seen NFTs coming in for potentially for game purchases. Like I have a unique NFT for something, and that maybe transfers game to game. I know I'm talking like last week's news, but like this is a new thing on the horizon. I wouldn't have seen that, but I know pretty much everybody in games is talking about it. And that would be for me. I mean, it's such a probably the biggest one realistically when I got into games when I was obviously quite young. It wasn't an industry at the time. It was fledgling. I never would see that I would make it from beginning game to end game, a whole life in games. And like, there's zero chance. Like, I'm not gonna go off and go, oh no, man, this is now's the time for me to go into insurance sales. Like, I'll be a game developer till the day I die.
Yeah, that's how my dad viewed games. He thought it was for kids. Like that's what he looked at. So a lot of people looked at it back then. Oh, this is for kids. You know what I mean? Like not, yeah. So it's funny how much the industry's grown. But speaking to that, like, what aspects of the industry do you feel need more work before we move on to the big next thing? I know like ray tracing's a topic right now. Everyone's trying to do that. Like what else do you think needs to be worked on right now before we go to the next big thing in gaming?
Well, I think one thing that would benefit gaming a lot is AI. We're at the cusp of bigger, better AI by looks of it. Maybe I'm wrong, but if that can become something you can integrate into a console game, big AI, then that could just transform the game. With them a shooter with the opponents being far cleverer and all these kind of things. It could just it could really revolutionize gaming if they can get it to work.
That's the second time I've heard that answer. Ed Freeze said the same thing. AI, computer intelligence, same thing, same answer. Yeah, that's cool. And then my very last question is, where would you like to see video games go in the future?
Back to 8-bit color, 2D graphics, nostalgia all the way.
I would like. I have had a couple of experiences in my life that I think we're getting to the point now. We're approaching the point where these things will definitely be a thing of the past, and it's not a surprise answer that I'm about to give. It's more diversity. As a mother of 4 brown kids, I would like them to be able to go into a game and create somebody who looks like them, who represents them. As a woman, I want to continue to go into games and see people who look like me. Certainly that has been a big underpinning of Empire of Sin. They're making sure that people see somebody who looks like themselves. So I still think we need to do more of that, because we have characters in games who have who are just Caucasian characters, but now their face is darkened, and now they're maybe ambiguously Hispanic. And I should just for my own kids, my kids are of Caribbean descent, Mexican descent, and Native descent, and so they cover the full spectrum of really the multicultural brown rainbow. And I have had an experience where my kids couldn't create themselves in a game, and that has been a powerful driver throughout my career. So we still need more of that. Loads more of that.
I think with diversity and the increased customization options that are coming with games, so like how many games now have the ability to create your avatar the way you want to be or the way you see yourself. I think adult themes. So when you look at something, you talk about the industry growing, but the audience is also growing. So we now have an audience who, like me, I'm a designer, but I'm still an audience. I'm 36 now. When in 1996 I was 11. Building levels with Lego instead of Unity. But you look at something like Disco Elysium, who has quite a deep adult theme. That game wouldn't have survived and wouldn't have been received as well as it would have been 15 years ago. We're now at a different time, and the audience has grown. So my hope is in the next 10, 15, 20 years that we start to see more games at adults, aimed at that kind of, not that they are like Disco Elysium, an interactive kind of novel experience, but that they deal with much deeper adult themes.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, that's a great point.
Then the last thing I want to ask, Brenda, do you have any like fun stories about Shack in the early days in 1996? Like, do you remember when you like first came to the site? Did you sign up for a forum account? Anything fun you can share with us from the back of the site days?
I mean, if you were involved in any kind of Quake stuff, the Shacknews was the place to go. And back then there was. The market was still very much controlled by magazines, right? And the big glossy periodicals. And I don't know if you remember Johnny Wilson. Johnny Wilson was with Computer Gaming World, and he would, if he walked up to you at a conference, you'd be like, oh, he was the guy who would, if you had been waiting all of, say, CES or all of E3, if Johnny Wilson is coming, everybody like, oh my God, Johnny Wilson is coming, and panic, mayhem. And the reason that I bring this up is because that was like, it never felt approachable. I know Johnny personally; he's a great guy, but back then I was intimidated as hell. Shacknews has always felt like a community. Always, it felt like it has felt like a super interactive place that if you wanted to get sort of the gamers feel on stuff, the community feel on stuff, it never felt separated. Like even like all the old periodicals back then, it felt very much like there was a separation between reviewer, gamer, and developer, and it just felt to me like that Shack was the whole thing. I will always have super fond memories of Shack. It's been, you know, and even there's been times that John and I have had something to announce and we've gone to Shack with the announcement first. So do it for Shack News.